roar of the wind and the crashing of waves against the hull. "Hold the ropes! Check the side cables!" the captain shouted, but his words seemed distant, like an echo amidst the infernal cacophony. The ropes, wet and slippery, cut into the crew members' hands as they fought to secure them. The effort was exhausting, but giving up was not an option. With each wave that struck the boat, it tilted even more to the right, forcing everyone to grab onto anything within reach to avoid being thrown overboard. The struggle to maintain balance was constant, and every moment felt like the boat was on the verge of capsizing. Thunder rumbled across the sky, like drums announcing nature's relentless power. Lightning illuminated the darkness, revealing the terrifying scene around Thema Furious, endless sea with waves that seemed eager to swallow the boat whole. It was a sight that could shake even the most experienced sailor. "We're losing control of the rudder," one of the crew members shouted. That news was anything but encouraging. Without full control of the rudder, the chances of keeping the boat aligned against the waves were nearly non-existent. They needed to act fast. The captain ordered a desperate maneuver, shifting the crew's weight to try to counterbalance the tilt and prevent the boat from capsizing completely. "Everyone to port! Now!" he yelled. The sailors, exhausted and drenched, moved with difficulty, clinging to each other and to the boat's sides as they dragged themselves to the opposite side. The maneuver had some effect. The boat was still dangerously tilted, but at least it no longer seemed on the brink of capsizing at that moment. However, the effort to keep it that way was enormous, and the crew knew that the smallest mistake could be fatal. Can you imagine the tension of being in such a situation? Every second feels like an eternity, and every decision carries the weight of entire lives. Adrenaline coursed through everyone's veins, but along with it came exhaustion. They were at their limit physically and mentally, and the sea gave no respite. The waves continued their relentless assault, like punches thrown by an invisible opponent. The merciless wind roared around the boat, ripping away anything not firmly secured. One of the crew members was nearly swept away by a wave, but managed to hold on at the last moment. "Check the remaining sails," the captain shouted, trying to think of anything that might give them some control. The remaining sails were in tatters, but they still attempted to adjust them to harness what little wind they could manage. It was an almost impossible task, but they had no other choice. Every movement was a battle against the overwhelming force of nature. The boat's tilt made even the simplest tasks, like tying a knot or securing a cable, monumental challenges. The crew's collective effort was impressive, but how much longer could they hold out? The storm seemed endless, and time, which usually passed quickly at sea, now felt frozen. Minutes dragged into hours as the boat and crew were pushed to their limits. The sea, in all its fury, seemed determined to crush them, but they kept fighting, driven by a mix of survival instinct and determination. And you? Have you ever wondered how you would react in such a situation? Would you stand firm, facing the unknown with courage, or succumb to despair in the face of the sea's overwhelming force? As the boat continued battling the waves, every crew member knew that the worst might still be ahead. But despite that, they did not give up. They were sailors, and the Shah, no matter how terrifying it was at that moment, was also their home. And in their home, they would keep fighting, no matter what it took. The storm seemed to have reached its peak. The battle against the ever more violent waves had lasted for hours, and each crew member's body was exhausted, marked by tension and constant struggle against the elements. The wind still howled fiercely, and the sound of the waves crashing against the hull remained a constant threat. But suddenly, a strange feeling began to spread through the air. The storm, which once seemed endless, was beginning to wane. The waves, though still large, began to lose intensity. The wind, once an unrelenting hurricane, started to ease. The sky, which had been a black curtain of clouds, now showed signs of clearing at the edges, as if offering the crew a brief respite. The deafening noise of the waves started to subside, and silence began creeping in between the gusts of wind. The crew, so focused on fighting to keep the sailboat on course, could hardly believe what was happening. It was as if the sea had, in some way, granted them a truce, as if it were preparing to release its children from the prison of chaos. But the calm that was emerging was not total peace. The waves still had strength, and the winds still blew, but the storm, which once seemed invincible, was no longer a constant threat. The boat, still leaning to the right, slowly began to stabilize. Each crew member, their bodies weary and minds drained, started to breathe a little easier, as if the weight of the world had been lifted from their shoulders, if only for a moment. The rudder, which had seemed unreliable and difficult to control, now felt more responsive, and though navigation remained challenging, it was once again possible. Meanwhile, the captain, his eyes fixed on the horizon, looked at the other crew members, and for a brief moment, a tired smile crossed his face. It was a subtle victory, but a victory nonetheless. They had survived the sea's fury. He knew they still needed to remain vigilant, but the worst had passed. Despite their deep exhaustion, the crew began working again, resetting partially damaged sails and adjusting the rigging. The battle against the storm had not only been physical, it had been emotional as well. They had faced the worst the sea had to offer and emerged alive. And at that moment, they held a newfound respect for the ocean and its uncontrollable power. The sky, once threatening, now brightened with the first rays of sunlight, beginning to break through the heavy clouds that had shrouded the boat throughout the storm. The soft, golden light of dawn painted the horizon with hues of orange and gold, promising a new day. Although the sea remained restless, the storm's threat had significantly lessened. The ship continued to sail through turbulent waters, but now with more control and direction. Looking toward the horizon, the crew felt relief. Calm, though uncertain, had arrived, and it's curious how, when the storm begins to subside, all the tension and fear slowly start to dissolve, replaced by gratitude for survival, for the struggle endured, and for the chance to continue. The storm had passed, but the memory of its fury would stay with them for a long time. Nature, in its vastness and unpredictability, had shown how capable it was of challenging humankind, but at the same time it had offered them a profound lesson in resilience, courage, and the strength that comes from working together, from never giving up, even when all seems lost. The journey was not yet over, but the worst was behind them. Now, as the sailboat moved toward the horizon, with calmer waters and gentler winds, the crew knew that although the sea could be ruthless, its immense beauty and untamed power were also part of what drove them forward. Had this experience changed them? Probably. The sea has a way of transforming people, of testing their limits, and making them discover strengths they never knew they had. They had faced the worst, and now they were ready for whatever the ocean might bring, armed with humility, courage, and above all, the certainty that together they could weather any storm. And as the sun shone brighter and the boat glided smoothly over the waters, the crew knew they had gained a newfound respect for the ocean and, more importantly, for themselves. Because in the end, what truly matters is not the storm itself, but how you choose to face it.